You can get pretty much anything on Amazon. You can get singing toothbrushes, litter boxes that are also plant stands, and of course, you can get books. Amazon has become the biggest bookseller in the world. But has it gotten too big? Today on the show, what does Amazon's size mean for authors? I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. So at our current point in the era of Amazon, it's kind of easy to forget that this is how it all started.
I like very much being able to find a book for certain and to order it very quickly without standing in a line and without any hassle.
It's the first website that I looked at and I went, this is what the web should be. It's fun, it's vast, and it piques my interest.
That's so quaint. That's one of the very first Amazon commercials from the 1990s, back when it was just a little startup online bookstore, and how fast they grow up, how quickly. Since then, it has completely taken over the market. There are a lot of people in publishing who say, wait a minute, Amazon, too big. It has too much power over what books get exposure. Some of those people are lobbying the Federal Trade Commission in the U.S. to loosen Amazon's grip on the book market. Now, there are signs that the FTC may file an antitrust suit against Amazon in the near future, and we wanted to hear from a couple of Canadian authors about how they've been affected by Amazon. Right now, we've got Jen Sukfong Lee in Burnaby and Anna Kana Schofield currently in Banff. Hey, you two.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi. How are you?
Good morning. India is on the moon is where I want to start. Did you see it? Did you see it?
No.
I was up watching it. It was incredible.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, what a glorious day to get to talk then.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, but we'll put India on the moon aside for just a second. And Jen, I'm going to ask you first. When I say the word Amazon as a writer, what is your gut reaction?
It is one of the hardest. The fact that Amazon exists for me as an author is one of the hardest, emotional journeys of my lifetime. I will say, because when my first book came out, it was 2007. Amazon existed, but it wasn't like the behemoth that it is today currently. But the thing about Amazon, I always think of it as the place where you can go to see the sales ranking on your book, to see how people are rating it, and to see how many they have on hand and how fast it can be shipped out. And none of those details are conducive to an author actually being their best emotional self. We shouldn't know these things until it's been filtered, until someone has given it some context. So for me, Amazon is scary emotional territory.
Scary emotional territory. Okay, Anna Kana, how about you?
Well, I would say my relationship is complicated. It's not unlike my sort of recent past in the dating world. I have experienced ghosting. My book isn't on there, or my book sold out. I've experienced breadcrumbing. I've also experienced the highs of the first date because, I won a prize that was sponsored by them and it paid for my son to have his dental treatment, which we'll probably get to. But principally, writers need readers. Writers are nothing without readers. And so that is the kind of means to fields and fields and fields and cities of readers. So the other side of Amazon that is totally unrelated to publishing is, I immediately think of toast and jam tea, which is this particular kind of tea that I can't get in Canada. And I have gone to the tea company in the UK and said, yo, I want this tea. And instead, I have to go to Amazon to some man that lives near Heathrow and pay $30 because the only way I can get this toast and jam tea. And then I also really love this show, 24 Hours in the A&E, which is like a reality show about a hospital. And that's where I go to feel good about humanity. So, it's like I'm crushed and I'm elevated.
It's a mixed bag, crushed and elevated. Similar to, Jen, what you're saying about this emotional roller coaster of, having your book come out in 2007, Amazon, a major player in the book industry at that time. I'm curious, since then, you also work as an editor. And what are some of the hoops, can you tell us about, that publishers have to jump through in order to conform to Amazon's wants and needs to get a book out there?
So what online purchasing has done for books is that every single one of the books that I publish is loaded with metadata. So these are the search terms that a reader might look for online to look for their book. So if you've got a book that is like, say, someone's looking for a mystery featuring a queer protagonist, this is the type of metadata that is in every single book. So one of the things that we have to do is make sure that's loaded so that Amazon can read it, so people can find it on Amazon. And the frightening thing about that is that Amazon messes up that metadata with alarming regularity. And in order for that to get fixed, it takes several weeks for that to even get fixed, if it ever does get fixed. And then if it doesn't get fixed, then readers cannot find the book. And that is really, really critical, especially think about a book that's been out for like 4 weeks. And if 3 of those weeks, the metadata is wrong and no one can find it, that's critical for sales, critical for the author, critical for the publishing company too.
Must be unbelievably frustrating. And there's like kind of nothing you can do about it, right? What else are you going to do? You sell them out of the back of a truck and on the side of the road?
I might, with a big megaphone, and just be like, buy this book. It's amazing. I edited it. I have good taste.
Just shouting out the metadata.
Yeah.
And Akena, you mentioned that in 2013, you had this big success through Amazon, right? Your book, Malarkey, won the Amazon First Novel Award. As you said, you won a cash prize. Your kid can get his teeth fixed at some point. I'm wondering if you can take me back then. How did that feel at the time? Did it feel complicated or did it feel like a pure win?
Well, I'm always, writers do not, consider that their books are going to get nominated for anything. I mean, usually it's like, well, did somebody, blood relatives buy your book? And especially with a first novel, or people you owe money to, you have to give them your book. But so there was a big ceremonial thing, like a prize ceremony in Toronto. And I mean, I just remember it very clearly because I was very concerned. At the time, my doctor told me not to eat flour. So I was mostly concerned about the snacks. So I kept firing these emails off to the prize people saying, well, what are the snacks going to be? Because, I can't eat flour. And so when I arrived at the gathering thing, the other thing was I didn't know anybody, in Toronto. So I just invited everybody in Toronto who'd ever done me a favor. So totally random people, including this one woman who worked at the MAC makeup shop because she'd helped me out doing some makeup. So I sent her this email and the sad thing was she never replied. She probably thought I was, some goofball.
Her loss.
But a bunch of people and their mothers who I'd never met basically came with me.
Yeah.
And then when I got there, I had this very special dinner that they'd made for me. But then they said, okay, now it's starting. And they tried to take my dinner away. So I tucked it under the chair because I was like, no. You see, like I say, I just thought, well, I'm not going to win this. Like, look at the books I write. Like, there's no way I'm going to win this. So then the other thing was that they asked us to read something from our books. So in my mind, it's true. I think I had a very tense relationship because I was published by Biblioasis, who are a wonderful independent press in Canada. And so I was very aware of what was happening as far as the predatory pricing practices, the deep discounts. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to read something from this book that's like a metaphor for what they're doing to writers. And so I read this scene from the book where a mother sees her son having rumpy-pumpy with another young man in a field, because I felt like that was a metaphor. Now, obviously, it was totally inappropriate, but I really enjoyed standing up there. And that was obviously before we found out who won it. So I'm pretty sure that the poor old marketing people were just beside themselves when they then said that I had won it. I was so astonished.
Yeah.
And then after they announced it, the marketing person came and said, tried to debrief with me. And so I was pretty bold. And I just said, well, I'll try not to talk about your predatory pricing policies.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because it was media. You had to go do media, right?
Yeah, you kind of have to play the game, right? Like you have to say, thank you so much for this prize. And
well, I didn't even remember who sponsored it, to be honest. I was just up there so surprised that I just started talking about poets from the 1960s. I was really quite nutty at the time.
It was Amazon. I want to get to what's happening right now. So there's this news that the Federal Trade Commission in America could soon be pursuing antitrust action against Amazon. Jen, I'm curious, what do you make of that news?
I think it's not a bad thing. I think that when there was the antitrust stuff going on with Penguin Random House trying to buy Simon and Schuster, and then that was stopped, was a good thing. Anything that makes book publishing or book buying into a monolith is never a good thing for the author, the publisher, or the reader, to be honest, because more variety means better things. So I think I mean, I don't know. I'm not an antitrust lawyer, if such a thing exists, but I am hoping that something like this will see the variety of retail in the marketplace, certainly online as well, because Amazon just dominates online buying. And I think there are so many other sort of opportunities for online buying for books that could be better.
Yeah, Anna Kena, what are your thoughts? Does Amazon need to be broken up?
Well, my thoughts, it's interesting because, I mean, like every human, I'm very contradictory about these things and I kind of revise my thoughts every 10 minutes. But I think it's actually 15, 25 years too late. I mean, I'm certainly not unhappy about it, but I think it's that we need to look at the broader thing here, which is convenience. And it's not the only demon in the park. For example, Netflix is having just as corrosive effect on our reading. You've got people who are, watching, these get your leg over in the sun shows for 18 hours. And, that takes people into a tunnel, So my feeling about it is, first of all, I don't know what the success rate is really with these antitrust lawsuits. It doesn't actually seem to be that good from what I read. But my feeling is that we need I hope that happens because obviously I'm a writer who is hand sold by independent booksellers. Definitely. They're hand selling my books. God bless them. A big kiss and love out to all the booksellers. But there is a bigger thing happening around the fact that we are, and it's partly to do with the cost of living crisis. We are so stressed trying to pay the rent. We need every minute of convenience that we can get. We're all working 3 jobs. So how do you stop that? How do you stop that need for convenience and immediacy in everything, including chopping a turnip, right?
Fair enough. Yeah. I want to end with you, Jen, just in the last minute that we have here. The reason Amazon's gotten so big, of course, is a lot of the convenience that Anna Kena is talking about right now. What do you want book buyers, book lovers to think about before they click on that buy now button, that yellow button on Amazon?
I'd really like them to think about how Amazon has affected the entire process of a book buying, book reviewing, book acquisition, and think about whether that has had a great effect on authors or no. Because right now it's either you're a huge bestseller or you're not selling anything at all. And there is no room in the middle for the mid-list authors to make a living.
Something we're seeing in so many arts industries. Yeah.
I'd like to give a shout out for the idea of raising our ambitions with our reading. Thinking of it like running a marathon. You're going to do the 10K, you're going to do the 25K, you're going to do the Iron Woman, right? So take that approach with your reading. Elevate yourself, elevate that mind. Go Plato on the books that you're reading.
To tie it all back together with the beginning, go to the moon.
Take it to the moon.
Take it to the moon. Thank you both for being here so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jen Suk-Fung Lee is an author based in Burnaby, BC, and fellow author Anna Kena Schofield joined us from Banff, Alberta. They were speaking about their experiences with Amazon, given that the Federal Trade Commission in the U.S. may file an antitrust suit against Amazon in the near future. I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. A few years ago at the Oscars, Bong Joon-ho, who's the Korean director of the movie Parasite, made this memorable acceptance speech.
자막, 서브타이틀의 장벽도 아니죠. 한 1인치 정도 되는 그 장벽을 뛰어넘으면 여러분들이 훨씬 더 많은 영화를 즐길 수 있습니다.
Once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many more amazing films.
You just heard Bong Joon-ho with help from a translator talking about the worlds that open up when you watch international movies. Those worlds are opened up through subtitles written by translators. And they're not just literally translating art word for word. They're also helping to make sure that the feeling and the emotional truth doesn't get lost on the way. So get this. Recently, the British Museum in London opened an exhibit about 19th century China. It includes some poetry. Canadian translator Elamin Wang found that some of her original translations of Chinese poetry were being used in this exhibit, but they were being used without her permission and without crediting her. It raises the question about the art of translation and how the work is valued. So earlier, I had the chance to speak with Elamin Wang. We started by talking about her deep relationship translating a Chinese poet called Chou Jing, whose poetry is featured in the exhibit. And I asked Elamin why she's drawn to Chou Jing's work.
She was a poet from the turn of the 20th century who has been overlooked in the context of poetry translation. There were some translations of her by early kind of academics and literary translators who were white, who misrepresented her work. And overall, her voices have been kind of overlooked, and she touches on really important themes in terms of women's friendship, queer platonic relationships, cross-dressing, gender roles, that make her work really kind of timely and contemporary and interesting.
Can you tell me a bit about her as a person as well? I think she was quite a trailblazer in her time.
Yeah, she was a revolutionary, a writer, activist. She grew up in a fairly well-off family, but broke from convention by leaving her husband, who was abusive, to study abroad in Japan, being one of the first women to do that. She ran a newspaper as well for kind of women's literature for a while. She got involved in various Republican revolutionary activities and was like building bombs in her bedroom. And she died, fighting for the cause that she believed in when she refused to escape after her collaborators were caught. And she left behind over 200 poems for us to read that survived.
Wow. So you've said that translating poetry is an intimate experience. Can you describe that more for me, the experience of getting into her mind to translate her poetry?
Yeah. So when I translate, I'm reading the same poem kind of many, many times, very carefully. It's not just about kind of enjoying it as a reader. I'm looking at, every word. I'm trying to imagine what does it feel like. I've written about the experience of, writing about her poem or translating her poem about cross-dressing, where I try to imagine how she felt kind of physically, emotionally when she wrote the poem. I think about like the relationships she had with the women in her life that she wrote poems to, whether friends or sisters or her mother. And I try to place myself also in the time that she lived in and imagine what it was like to have kind of face, those kind of limiting roles when it comes to kind of gender and the challenges that she faced and like the social political background. So I really try to get into kind of the space of the poetry.
So how did you find out that the British Museum was taking these translations that you put so much personal and artistic energy into and using them without your permission?
Yeah, so, I had published some translations of her poetry back in 2021, and they were widely read, and many translators and academics in the field know about the work. So when this exhibit started happening, multiple people came to me and was like, the China Hidden Century exhibit has a section on Chou Jing, like might be of interest to you. We saw, that they have translations of her poetry, and you're like one of the main translators doing this work right now. So like, are you aware of this? So I started, looking around at this exhibit. I looked at photos, I looked at videos, and then I just saw that multiple, excerpts and like a full poem translation of mine were used.
What was your reaction?
I was shocked. I live in Vancouver and this was in London, halfway across the world. And they had used it in so many different formats without just reaching out to me at all and letting me know and asking for permission.
So I'm curious, after you discover that the British Museum is using your translations, you're shocked, as you said. What did you do?
So there's been, over the last few years, a movement on social media and in the translation community called #NameTheTranslator, where people will post on social media and people will kind of talk about the importance of crediting translators. As someone who's active on Twitter and who's talked about kind of translation issues in the past, and who can't, physically go visit the museum and it had already been up on display for over a month at this point. So I, went to Twitter, I kind of tagged the British Museum and posted some pictures of what I saw and was like, the British Museum, I just found out that you use my translations without permission. How are you going to fix this? #NameTheTranslator.
Yeah. So then what did they do? What was their response?
They contacted me and through a series of emails. The first reaction, the first email was like, we forgot to put your name on the acknowledgement board. And we're grateful for the hundreds of people who helped make this exhibit happen. And again, I was shocked because, it's not just you forgot my name and on the board. Like, you literally did not get permission in the first place. And also I was uncredited. But, there are multiple things going on here. Then there were more emails kind of offering to send me a permission form to get permission, but emphasizing that they are like an academic institution. Many academics allow them to use their work for free or at a very low cost. So again, I was, just very frustrated by the minimizing of what happened. And then, there was, before I could respond to that, they had just removed the Chinese original poetry along with the English translation. And it was like, we'll just pay you for the appearance in the catalog, which there's nothing we can do about because it's printed.
So wait, sorry, just to make sure I'm understanding this right, like their immediate solution was just to erase the work itself, like erase the poetry from the collection and also to erase your translation, obviously, along with it, like rather than figuring out a way to make this right, just to like...
That's right. So, they offered initially to obtain kind of permission and they didn't even get a chance to respond. And then 24 hours later, they were like, we have removed the Chinese and the English, which, I understand mistakes happen. And what happened the first time, it was already not great. But, you could have taken steps to just work with me and fix that rather than to kind of make the problem worse.
Yeah, so it's taken almost 2 months, but you reached a settlement with the British Museum earlier this month. Both Cho Jing's poetry and your translations are back in the exhibit. You're now credited as a translator. You're on the museum's website. There's a statement also that talks about how the museum is committed to making policy to make sure translators are properly credited on future projects. That sounds like huge. How does it feel to know that you helped in making that happen?
I appreciate that the British Museum, came to me after I was able to get legal representation. I think it is really important that happened. It was one of the main things that I really wanted because I think it was very important for them, to be accountable and give an explanation of what went wrong and how are they going to avoid repeating this mistake in the future, not just for me, but also for the translation community. So that is really kind of important to set a precedent, for them, for other museums, for anyone working with translators.
What do you feel like your experience says about the way that translators are valued?
I think translation and kind of translators have really been kind of underappreciated. Some people on social media replied to me and thought that translation was not copyrighted. Some people, think that translation is just kind of running something through Google Translate or kind of using a dictionary or being kind of bilingual or multilingual. But it requires so many different kinds of skills and is a labor and it's, its own form of art, a type of writing. And I think people really don't recognize kind of how much work goes into translation, and people don't think about the people who are behind the translation.
Yeah. Well, after talking about Cho Jing's poetry and then also about your artfulness in translating it, I would love to hear some of it. So you're going to share a few lines from one of the poems that's featured in the British Museum's exhibit. It's called A River of Crimson, A Brief Stay in the Glorious Capital. Before you read it, do you mind just setting it up quickly? Like, what's it about?
So this poem was written by Cho Jing around the time that she ran away from her abusive husband and was spending a Mid-Autumn Festival alone. And this was a time of family gatherings, but instead she was going through a very difficult period of her life. Also, the poem covers themes of autumn and autumn imagery, and this is a common theme in her work as well. 蜀子胸襟谁识我？英雄末路当我者。觅红尘何处觅知音？青山湿。How can narrow, uncultivated minds comprehend my nature? A hero at the past end must suffer trials and tribulations. In the vast worldly dust, where can I find my soulmate? My robe is stained with tears.
Isn't that beautiful? I so appreciate Elin for shining a light on something that maybe we don't think about that often, the art of translation. So you just heard Elin Wang reading her English translation of part of the poem A River of Crimson by the Chinese poet Cho Jing. Elin is a writer and Chinese English translator who's based in Vancouver. You can see her translations for the poet Cho Jing at the British Museum now with Elin's permission and full credit. Also, Elin's book of poetry translations called The Lantern and the Night Moth will be published early next year. And that's it for the show today. I'm Talia Schlanger sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. You can find me on Instagram at Talia Hannah Schlanger. I'll see you next time.